We're four friends with hot takes on food media.
And we're here to review and recap all kinds of food shows in bite-sized seasons.
Plus, virtual potlucks, cooking adventures, and food memes.
Welcome to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
Hey, it's Justine.
And it's me, Meg. Yes, it's just the two of us today.
Wow.
Sadly, I know. Amanda and LJ can't make it on the episode today, but they, as always, are here in spirit. And yes, we're still waiting on LJ to pop out her baby.
Can I tell you, literally yesterday, I had a dream right before I woke up that I was checking Instagram or Slack, and that LJ had posted that was like going into labor, like she had her baby. And so I woke up, like instantly woke up out of the dream, grabbed my phone, checked Instagram, checked Slack, messaged LJ on Instagram being like, I had a dream you were having your baby. And she was like, nope, not yet. I'm like, damn it.
Dang, sadly not prophetic. I bet she wishes it were.
Yeah.
All right, so welcome back to Season 3 of Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes. Each season we explore a different cooking show, and this season we've been talking about the Great British Bake Off, UK Series 11, aka US Season 8. The Great British Bake Off is a British television baking competition in which a group of amateur bakers compete against each other in a series of rounds, attempting to impress a group of judges with their baking skills. Yes. On the menu for today, we are talking about Episode 7, 1980s Week, and Episode 8, Dessert Week. But before we head into the baking tent, we're going to kick things off by talking about what we've been cooking, eating, getting up to in the kitchen, all that good stuff. So, Justine, what have you been doing?
2 words for you, Meg. Broccoli pesto.
I figured it was something pesto. Fill in the blank pesto.
God. I'm so predictable now. But like I have been getting more and more into doing more massive meal preps because in these days it's just easier because I gotta cook everything every day and work full-time job. So I've just been like straight off roasting like 2 giant sheet pans of vegetables, and then they often get paired with like a grain like quinoa or rice, and then a sauce, and sometimes that sauce is pesto. And I like to change it up. I found this recipe from Oh She Glows. I'm just going through her cookbook lately, and it is broccoli. After you blanch it, you sort of rice it, and then add in with parsley and other pesto-like things like nutritional yeast, of course, olive oil or avocado oil, garlic, like everything is a pesto. Oh, and pepitas, of course.
Everything's a pesto if you try hard enough.
Exactly. That's just how I'm living these days, trying to make things easy for myself.
Just living life one pesto at a time.
Meg with the catchphrases today.
I'm just going to continue with cliche phrases and just insert pesto where another word should be. It works pretty well, apparently.
Yeah. What about you?
Well, I think today I want to talk about a particular condiment I've been using a lot. It's a particular Szechuan chili crisp. So Szechuan chili crisp is chili peppers and oil and sesame oil, fermented black beans, garlic, sesame. I already said sesame oil, mushroom powder, seaweed, Szechuan peppercorns. And I've just been loving it, been putting it on veggie pot stickers especially. And this particular condiment I got from a website called Fly by Jing. And Jing, aka Jenny Gao, founded the company in 2018, and she was inspired by the hometown flavors where she grew up in Szechuan. And Fly is what they call hole-in-the-wall eateries that are so good they attract diners like flies. So that's where the name Fly by Jing came from. I've almost gone through a whole jar of this chili crisp already, so I ordered another, and I ordered 2 of their other sauces because it's just so tasty. So yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to that.
Oh, nice.
They say to put it on ice cream, which I have not tried yet, but I don't know. It might be good, might be interesting.
Do it. Do it. Do it.
I also want to give a quick shout out to my parents for getting me this adorable chicken dish a la what Sohla used in that Stump Sohla episode where she made the 7-course convenience store meal. because I was raving about the chicken dishes in our episode of Pod Appétit. My parents got me one.
Oh my god. Oh, your parents are the best.
They also recruited Amanda to help source this chicken dish because they couldn't remember what episode it was that was mentioned. So thanks also to Amanda.
That's so cute. Well, on that note, I feel like your parents should know that when this episode comes out, it will be my birthday. So just putting that information out there.
Parents, if you're listening.
Oh, no. JK.
This is why we need a Patreon. All right, let's get into it. We are going to talk about the Great British Bake Off 2020, Episode 7, 1980s Week. Netflix had this to say in their ever-interesting descriptions of the episodes. The cooks feel the heat of 80s eats, including buttery quiches, fried finger donuts, and super cool ice cream cakes. But rising temps tempt fate.
Ooh.
Dun dun dun.
Ooh.
So I think that was the most interesting part of this episode. It was apparently really hot. It was the hottest day of the year for them in 2020, and apparently the third hottest day on record ever for the London area. So that was pretty crazy. And the poor bakers had to try to make pastry, which infamously does not take well to heat, and also ice cream cakes, which, well, they melted. Let's just say.
They melted.
Spoiler alert. They melted.
Spoiler alert. I've never heard a judge or, a host say, like, move your showstopper to your freezer. It's always like, put it on the end of your bench. There's like, okay, just put it in there. We're going to walk away.
Yeah, I imagine they must have taken all the glamour shots really quickly. Just like, quick, take photos and then shove them back in the freezer.
Right. It's 80s week.
It's 80s week.
What is?
What is 80s? This is, again, when we need LJ here to maybe add a little bit of insight into what the 80s in the UK looked like. But, it makes sense. Decades have food trends. We've seen them ourselves in our own lives. Like, remember when they put bacon on everything? So even though I was a child in the 80s, I can't really remember that many 80s food trends, but I will assume that what they are talking about here are relatively accurate.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Peter wasn't even born in the 80s. Sweet summer child.
What a baby.
Again, this is kind of gimmicky, but I thought it was a fun concept. It's not the first time Jabibo has done a decades week. They did 30s week last season. So I'm guessing this might be something we'll continue to see going forward.
It's a bit, I don't know. I like it when it's not so modern. I do like the 30s week. And I would like earlier decades like that. Just the modern is a little weird for me because they're just like, donuts were popular. I'm like, donuts
I want to
okay.
see 60s savory jellos or something like that.
Oh my God, Aspic Week.
Yeah, Aspic Week. Ooh, let's petition for that. All right, so they started out this episode with the signature challenge, and they had to make 2 different kinds of savory quiches. And they were also required to make short crust pastry for the quiche base. And Prue explained that this was a callback to popular quiches from the 80s, particular things like quiche Lorraine, but they wanted contemporary flavors.
I think this is one of the things where I think it's weird that they make 2 different quiches that don't really go together. I don't know. There are some things where it makes sense, like make 2 different petit fours, because those are kind of things that you would sample.
Yes.
But to me it didn't make quite a lot of sense the way they were like, oh, I'm making a pizza flavored quiche and a pea flavored quiche.
It also makes more sense to do different versions when you can have a savory version and a sweet version.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've ever heard of a sweet quiche. But Lottie did English breakfast as one of hers and summer salad as the other. Paul and Prue were very dubious of the baked beans. I don't know.
Okay.
I like baked beans in a full English, but that's just my opinion.
I was also like, why do people hate baked beans? And I think Amanda had said to us before, baked beans should not be a part of breakfast.
Again, I would like to know what LJ thinks is a full English. Like, what should be in a full English? Is she pro-baked beans or anti-baked beans? I can't remember.
I'm going to guess and say that LJ is anti-baked beans.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Well, she'll fit right in with Prue and Paul. And
Yeah.
Dave also made English breakfast quiches, so they were kind of in competition with one another. And Dave opted not to have baked beans.
Yeah, but Dave opted to have scrambled eggs in
Eggs in a quiche. Eggs on eggs on eggs.
Yeah, when the thing is, it's gone wrong when it turns scrambled.
Exactly. That's how you know you've messed up your quiche custard, is when it looks like scrambled eggs. Yeah.
Also, his combination of beef and avocado.
I was wondering if that was, again, one of his quote-unquote Mexican-inspired flavors, because he likes going for Mexican stuff a lot throughout the show.
Having it in quiche form just threw me off, but I get it in taco form.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want a big piece of steak in a quiche.
Yeah, these were just interesting. You know what? Ermine consistently stresses me out because she goes things her own pace.
She was definitely behind on time in this challenge, but in the end, apparently the flavors were really good. The judges went absolutely nuts for the flavors of her quiches, so I guess it was not too bad for her in the end.
Yeah, but she just stressed me out.
Yeah, we want to see her do well for sure.
Yeah, let's see. Lottie definitely impressed the judges.
They really liked her pastry.
Mm-hmm.
Dave, they thought was okay, but they said it was overspiced. Mark did 2 forms of fish quiche. And like you said, they were kind of similar. The judges were like, we don't really see the big difference between these, so it didn't make a lot of sense to have 2 nearly identical dishes.
Yeah, Laura had a leaky bottom.
And her pastry was kind of tough, but they liked the flavors. And they also especially liked Peter's flavors, and they said that the decoration was very pretty.
So, I mean, we're getting to the nitty-gritty that, as we're going to talk about, if it takes, somebody really messing up to be knocked out.
Yes. And the judges do point this out in this episode, or the episode after. It comes down to the mistakes now.
Mm-hmm. It's getting raw.
It's getting hot in the kitchen.
Boom!
Literally.
Literally.
So the poor bakers, next for the technical challenge, they had to make custard and jam finger donuts because everyone wants to slave over a deep fryer in 95-degree heat.
This is another one of the things that, if people had never made donuts before, Peter had never deep fried something.
Right.
Poor
But of course,
Peter.
since he's practically perfect in every way, he did totally fine.
Yeah. He's just smart that way,
I think one of Peter's biggest advantages is that he remains calm, or at least relatively calm. So even when things start to go badly for him, he just takes a step back and gets right back into it, which I think really helps. We see what happens when bakers get frazzled and they just make desperate, chaotic decisions.
Dave's were awful.
Terrible. They looked so bad.
Yeah, it's the worst donut I've ever seen, Dave.
It looked like burnt bread. It looked like a little burnt baguette.
Yeah, it did. It really did. That's ugh.
I also wanted to mention, I've never heard these called finger donuts here in the States. I've always heard them called Long Johns.
Yeah, I was supposed to say Long Johns.
Yep. And also the split down the top, they cut it like a hot dog bun in this episode, which is just weird to me. I don't think I've ever seen a donut served that way.
These are interesting donuts.
No surprise at all, Dave gets last in the technical because his were just kind of pathetic, and Ermine gets first because she actually made some pretty good donuts despite the heat and everything else.
Yeah, Ermine's were good, and Peter and Mark's were good. Laura's were a little over-fried. Lottie's were inconsistent and dark. And Lottie was like, I just like a dark donut.
I like a dark donut.
I love that. Come on, Lottie. Every time she's like, well, that's how I eat it.
Yeah, she's like, I don't know what they're talking about. I love it like this. Good old Lottie. Let's enjoy Lottie while we can.
Yeah. Just keep saying all the good Lottie things.
I know. So finally, for the showstopper, they had to make ice cream cakes. This day of filming was a little less hot, but still very, very hot. So
Yeah.
I was really surprised that none of the bakers did a riff on the Viennetta, because to me, this is the quintessential 1980s ice cream cake. It is kind of like a lasagna, sort of. It's like layered with crisp chocolate and then kind of piped ice cream. They even mentioned it in this episode as one of the more popular ice cream cakes in the 80s. And it's a British thing, the Viennetta. So I was really surprised we didn't see one of the bakers tackle this.
This one was like a little confusing for me. They were like, you have to have a bake element. You have to have a mousse element as well.
I think they just said they had to have a baked element.
Okay. Well, so many of them had mousse.
They did have a lot of mousse, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, this is one where I'm like, what were the requirements for this? Yeah, but we can just say at the top, poor Lottie with the ice cream on the outside.
Yeah. Once again, the judges are right when they point out something in the prejudging. Like when they go workstation to workstation and they ask the contestants to explain their recipes. A lot of times when they bring up something questionable, like, oh, I don't know if that's going to work, I would say probably 9 times out of 10, they're right about it. And in fact, it doesn't work. And they were like, well, it's a little risky to have ice cream as the outside instead of a cake or a baked element. And I mean, that makes total sense, right? You kind of want something to insulate the cake, or at the very least to keep it a little bit more structurally sound. And Lottie said that in previous practices, she had put it in a square tin or rectangular tin. And I think even that would have worked better than what she did on the show.
Yeah, she was just trying to put it on and mold it and scrape it, kind of just like chocolate. I didn't see any of this scenario working for her unless she was in like a refrigerated space, you know?
Exactly. Well, I wanted to know what you thought of her mixtape idea, because this is kind of your thing.
I know, right?
Find Justine at Mixtape Montage.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me. I discovered one of the Google backgrounds is like a grid of pink mixtapes.
Oh, perfect.
I'm like, wow, they made this for me. Anyway, yes, I love everything cassette tape. I have a couple cassette tape decorations in my house, and I would have loved to see this cake finish, you know?
It didn't look like a cassette at all. Even the little white chocolate decoration on top that was supposed to look like the reels or the spools or whatever wasn't executed well. It did not look like a cassette tape. Poor Lottie.
Poor Lottie. Between Lottie and Laura forgetting to turn on the actual freezing button on the ice cream maker, like, I forget what everybody else does in this. I mean, I'm sure they do good things, but these two, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, they probably devoted almost all the screen time to them too, because they were just disaster after disaster between the two of them. Yeah, Laura really struggled too. Actually, though, seeing how much Laura's cake melted, what she presented to the judges actually looked better than I thought it would, based on what I'd seen of the cake before. Still didn't look great, but yeah, it was a bit of a mess.
Yeah. Ermine's was interesting. Good. I don't know how, like, she did that. There was a mold. Was that ice cream on the outside or mousse on the... I don't know.
I don't know what exactly she put on the outside. She airbrushed it a little bit.
Yeah.
So maybe it was fondant or something. I'm not really sure. But it looked very nice. And hers was very structurally sound. It didn't really melt at all. It cut really nice, really bright, vibrant colors. Peter's was really good. Peter is showing his Christmassy side. He makes a Christmas cake. This is not his first Christmas bake either, but just at this point, we're kind of like, okay, I see the pattern now.
Peter
you
loves
love Christmas. We get it. Maybe he's really an elf.
That makes sense.
It's the only explanation. And Dave, he really saved himself with his flavors because he was kind of close to the bottom going into the showstopper, and he made a tiramisu cake and he piped some icing on top, which again, Paul was quite dubious about whether it would work or not. It did melt a little bit, but kind of half of a win, I suppose. But they liked his flavors, and they were pretty impressed with Mark's as well. And Mark made an ice cream parlor striped sponge, which I thought turned out really neat. Very fine stripes.
I don't know if I thought it in this episode or the next episode, but I just, at least between these two episodes, I'm like, Dave? I'm sorry, Dave. I don't think Dave's a good baker.
Dave is one of those contestants where I keep forgetting he's there. I'm just like, oh yeah, you're still here. Because he doesn't make anything particularly wow worthy that's really going to stick in my mind. And again, sorry, Dave, he doesn't really have a standout personality either. He doesn't have a big personality.
Yeah, and just like he made tiramisu again. Well, again, meaning he made something with chocolate and coffee.
He does like his chocolate and coffee.
I don't know. I see him always consistently just scraping by. Like he did terrible in the technical. He like doesn't do things that put him at the top of the pack. He's just like just above the bottom of the pack, which makes me want him cut, you know?
Although interestingly, he has one star baker, and up to this point of the remaining contestants, the only one who hasn't won star baker is Ermine.
Which I definitely felt Ermine deserved it before. And I think Prue said in this.
Prue did say, she said that she thought that Ermine deserved star baker 2 to 3 times in the past, but that she was just barely edged out, beaten out by small details.
Yeah.
So yeah, speaking of Ermine, she won star baker in this episode, finally, which wasn't really a surprise. She did really well in all the challenges. Despite her quiches being a little bit underbaked, the judges were really wowed by the flavors. Yeah. So yeah, she really, really deserved it, I think. She's
been doing well for a while, and I think by this episode, I had really gotten on the Ermine train for Ermine all the way. I feel like this is the arc we're giving, we're seeing is like Ermine is really successful.
Definitely. And her son kind of tackled her and said he was proud of her, which was just adorable.
But then poor Lottie.
I have the unfortunate job of saying who's being sent home. And I'm afraid it's Lottie.
No, get rid of Dave.
Get rid of Dave. Don't get rid of Lottie. Or between the two people who were way in the bottom this episode, get rid of Laura.
But, oh, yeah. It came down to Lottie or Laura.
Yeah. So I was really, really rooting for Lottie to stick in the contest. I want to say she was my favorite, but I don't know. I really like Peter as well. Maybe they were tied for my favorite. But of all the eliminations, this one hurt the most. And I think throughout the competition continues to be the one that hurt the most. So
yeah, Lottie was my favorite as well.
Yeah, I think she was also Noel's favorite. He seemed to be playing favorites at the judging table and kind of urging the judges to keep Lottie.
Yeah, he's like, but Laura hasn't been doing well for a while.
He's like, yeah, that Laura's been in the bottom a lot. She's always fighting to stay in.
They keep going back to like, well, it doesn't matter. You get a fresh start every week. And I'm like,
exactly. Ugh. Yep. But I realized something with Lottie leaving and with what Noel said. And what I thought is that there's really not a lot of chemistry between the contestants in this season. And I think that might be something I don't like about it, because Lottie and Mark with a K had chemistry, but then Mark with a K went away. So that was kind of sad. I felt like Lottie and Noel had good chemistry. But now that Lottie's gone, I stopped and thought a moment. And I was like, well, who has good banter of the remaining people? And I'd say like no one. I have no idea what their relationships are with one another at all. I think that Noel has a little bit of banter with Ermine, but beyond that, I think there was a lot of chemistry missing in this season.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know, I feel like I was maybe reading too much into the very minor interactions we see between these contestants, but I felt like there was maybe a little bit of butting heads between Laura and Lottie in this episode. They were both really struggling with their cakes, and they kind of seemed to be like vying for like who had it worse off, Yeah. She's like, I forgot to press my button, and Lottie's like, well, mine's melting. Does that make you feel better? And she's like, no, not really. And it's like, we get it. You guys both have bad cakes. We feel bad for both of you. Like, you don't need to win worst cake. Although one of you does, and it's Lottie, I'm sorry to say. And Lottie kind of chided Laura to stop crying. She's like, oh, stop crying. And it felt a little bit heated. I don't know. I would be upset, too, if I were just eliminated as well. And if I were trying not to cry, I would also maybe get a little bit testy at someone who was crying and would probably set me off as well. But I don't know. That is just her deadpan humor. And Laura did say that behind her sarcastic exterior is a kind, lovely human being, is what she said of Lottie. So goodbye, Lottie. We will miss you.
3 more episodes.
So as we say farewell to Lottie, we're going to say hello to a short commercial break. We will be right back to talk about episode 8, Dessert Week. And welcome back. Moving on now to episode 8, Dessert Week. Netflix says, it's cheesy, not easy. Star finalists rise and fall like failed mini cheesecakes, while Sussex pond puddings and jelly art cakes shake the bakers. So here we are in the quarterfinals. That was a weird description, Netflix. kind of all over the place.
What is dessert week? How is it different from pastry week or cake week or...
I know, I find this very funny because, yeah, aren't all these other things they've made so far also desserts?
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe there's a strange distinction like with pudding. I still don't know entirely what a pudding is.
Yeah, what the heck is a pudding? We're so lost on this podcast without LJ.
LJ, where are you? So this episode brings us the very shocking revelation that Prue is 80 years old. 80.
Looking good, Prue.
I don't know. If her secret is eating steamed suet pastries with a whole ass lemon, then sign me up, I guess.
I just love the phrase whole ass lemon.
Hyphenation important.
This episode also brings us to the quarterfinals.
It sure does. We're nearing the end here. So to start off the signature challenge, they made 12 mini cheesecakes. Matt was quite disappointed that they were so small.
Yeah, teeny tiny invisible cheesecakes.
Mark made his too big. However, the judges were not happy about the size of Mark's.
Whatever.
I don't know. I feel like I don't have a lot to say about this particular challenge. It's like, it's cheesecake. No one did terrible. No one did particularly well either.
Peter made a ginger and lime cheesecake, which Paul, of course, was like, I love
He's
lime.
like, that sounds like key lime to me. So sign me up.
Make me some key lime right now, Peter. Okay. A lot of the bakers use passion fruit, but this is something Paul doesn't like. Oh my God, Paul, it's just like everything. That's
he was joking, though, about not liking passion fruit.
Was he?
Yes.
Okay, good. I can't tell. I can't tell.
He said he had gone off it, and they said, really? And he said no, and laughed.
Okay, well, this section of the show brings us the great Mr. Spoon.
It does bring us Mr. Spoon. The return of Mr. Spoon, question mark?
Question mark. I'm all about the Mr. Spoon content that we will have from
Mr.
henceforth.
Spoon, a.k.a. Andre. Yeah, henceforth we shall see a lot of Mr. Spoon.
This section of the show did give us a great musical number from Matt about Paul.
That's true. He made Jibibo into a musical, and it was pretty great.
I would see that show. Let's put it on the West End.
Yeah, Matt can bring that to the West End. That can be his next performance.
Love it.
We also learned that apparently Peter doesn't like cheese. So I guess Laura's plan to put him in a small cage and feed him cheese is not going to pan out after all.
It wouldn't work. He would starve.
Poor little Peter.
Oh my God. I can't believe we've got 5 people now.
Yeah, it's crazy. My notes can actually devote time to everyone, which I don't think I've really done before.
The cheesecakes, I mean, not so bad. It's either like they look good and there's nothing terrible happening here.
Peter was kind of on the bottom because his cheesecakes definitely collapsed. They had what they called a crater or a cauldron, so they weren't exactly cheesecake looking. The judges weren't terribly impressed by Peter's flavors either. They did, however, really like Laura's flavors. Again, they were kind of a mess. They were sort of splurging all over the place, but the texture and flavor were spot on, which the judges liked. Dave was kind of in the middle. They looked nice and neat, but the flavors didn't really particularly wow them. They were like, oh, this tastes good. And Ermine's also looked cute in these cute little jam jars. I liked her presentation a lot.
Pinterest.
Very Pinterest. She tied little string around them. Each had a label. Really cute, but they didn't like the texture in particular or the flavor. And Mark as well. Again, they thought that they were too big, and that since there was only a little bit of apricot on one part of the cheesecake, that the flavor didn't really translate across the whole dish.
Yeah. Peter and Mark were just very disappointed in themselves at their performance.
Yes, for sure. As they should be.
Oh, no, they did great. I love
I'm just
them.
kidding. All right, so moving on to the technical challenge, maybe the most batshit of technical challenges, which is saying a lot. So this was the Sussex pond pudding, apparently a 17th century recipe. It is steamed suet pastry with a whole lemon inside and a butter and sugar mixture. And the idea is that you cut into it and that this pond of sugar mixture kind of oozes out once you dig into it. Which,
sounds terrible.
Yum. Well, I really don't get this whole lemon. Is the rind so soft that you don't really even notice it in a well-made one? I don't know. And also, there's still going to be seeds in there. I don't really want to be picking around lemon seeds when I'm just trying to eat a dessert.
This needs explanation.
Prue, explain yourself. Explain this challenge, please.
So suet, we learned, is animal fat that is around, what does he say, liver?
Most of the major organs, but yeah, including the liver.
Organ fat. I love
Anyone
it.
who is a bird watcher probably has suet. Birds love it.
Oh yeah, so this is where I thought that Dave is a terrible baker.
Why?
Mr. Last to go in, first to come out. I just don't see him at this point in the show, in the final 5, having any instincts at all.
He really did not steam them long enough, which, again, you think with instincts, at least even looking around the tent, you think you would notice that everyone else was cooking theirs for longer.
Peter can look at it. He's never made one before, but he's like, yeah, I want this to go darker, and be a little more crispier.
And also, Dave really struggled to get the string handle just right. Everyone struggled with that, but Laura reached the point where she was like, forget this, and made a handle out of tinfoil, which is like, okay, I guess whatever works. I guess the judges aren't judging on the exact technique you used as long as the final product is what they want. So
Yeah.
he got really stuck on that one.
So all of these were bad.
Yes, they were all bad. They made a point, even though they awarded Laura first in this challenge. They were like, it was kind of just the least worst, least bad.
They were pretty much all raw.
All bad. Not a single baker had 2 structurally sound puddings to present. At least one of them had already sort of burst open and released the pond onto the plate.
Release the pond.
Release the pond. Release the Sussex pudding.
Oh, God.
I feel like Ermine was saying what everyone was thinking. She just says, why? Who eats this? As she angrily pounds the suet. Anyway, it was a disaster, Claire.
So at this point in the show, we have a little judge check-in, and we've got Laura in line for Star Baker and Peter in line to go home.
Yes, before we get into the showstopper, Peter is the only person they name as being in the bottom. Ermine, Dave, and Mark are kind of sitting pretty in the middle, and Laura, like you said, is on top. So our sweet baby angel Peter, our perfect cinnamon roll too good for this world, is on the bottom. Will he make it?
He's stressed. I've never seen him look so like, oh dear God.
He did look extremely stressed. Yeah, and I would be too, because the showstopper challenge is jelly art design cakes. So they have to inject liquid jelly into set jelly to make these beautiful, mostly floral designs.
Yeah, this is a thing that's like, yeah, you've seen this on the internet. People get paid to do it. But like, can you learn this in a week? Are they provided these special injection tools?
Would any amateur home baker make this ever? Unless they had, a professional Instagram account. I don't know.
Oh, but you know what jelly design cake Noel would make?
I do, but why don't you tell us?
Oh, yeah, it's a nude sculpture of Paul Hollywood with lime-flavored nipples.
Yeah.
Lime, of course, Paul's favorite flavor.
Accurate to real life.
Yup. Don't think about it too hard.
No, please don't.
Oh, this is the one that has to have a mousse and baked element, like the cake.
Ah, yes.
So many elements.
Earth, wind, fire. All right, so Ermine made a poppy flower, and she starts off the challenge by saying, I think eating jelly is an Anglo-Saxon thing.
Ermine saying it like it is. Jelly's a white person's name.
Yeah. Mark made a 2-tiered cake. Laura made a koi pond. Dave made a beach scene. And Peter, once again, was all Christmassy with a snow globe.
Oh, man. For Laura's, I didn't like the dark colors of the pond.
It looked very pond-y. It
Yeah.
looked like a real pond. So on the one hand, I really liked it. I think ultimately Laura's might have been my favorite design as far as the jelly cakes went because I thought the fish were really cute. I thought the flowers turned out really nicely. But like you said, it was maybe too realistic.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect that cake to taste good.
Right, yeah. Like, you don't want to eat something that looks like muddy, murky.
Dirty fish poop pond water.
Yeah. With, like, algae.
Yeah.
Like, give me, like, the crystal clear, pretty green.
Exactly.
Dave's was very simple. His little striped beach design.
While it wasn't my favorite design, I feel like he has to get extra kudos for using a different technique than everyone else. And I got the impression that maybe he even thought of this technique himself of layering all the different... He would make a layer, wait for it to set, build the next layer on top of it, wait for it to set. And this made this sort of 3D kind of diorama, kind of immersive looking picture, which I at least liked because it was different from everyone else's.
Yeah, so he didn't really have to learn the injection techniques.
Mm-hmm.
Which seemed like really freaking hard because you have to think 3-dimensionally.
It did seem very hard. And also, as you could see in this episode, the bakers couldn't really gauge exactly how it looked until they turned it upside down and looked at it. They had these clear bottomed bowls or whatever so that they could see what they were doing as they were working. But as you're doing the actual injection, it's a little bit hard to see exactly what it's going to look like.
Yeah, that's like something, if you want a color on top that represents like a light point or shading, you have to put that first.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, it's a whole other, like, thinking like an artist.
It looked very surgical. It kind of looked like tattoos in a way because Laura would put an injection in and then she'd wipe off the excess ink with a paper towel. And I was like, she's giving her cake a tattoo.
Yeah, exactly. I really liked Hermine's. I thought it was beautiful. Like,
Hermine's was very nice.
Like, the red popping against the dark background worked really well for me. Hers was my favorite.
Pretty much every element was really nice. And I also liked that the dome of the actual jelly part was huge. So you had this very impressive, very huge jelly art. She put a chocolate collar around the cake, which turned out perfectly. And then she also piped along the bottom of the collar, which was also gorgeous. So I feel like every element absolutely delivered, especially on looks. Like, if you look at Laura's cake, which they did like, it was unfinished around the outside. There wasn't any icing encasing anything. Same with Mark's. It was just kind of slapped together on the bottom. But every single element of Hermine's was perfect.
Mark's, nothing went right.
Poor Mark.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Again, I did want to give kudos to Mark for his design of having the 2 tiers. No one else even attempted that. I thought it was a clever idea. But the bottom part, the baked elements, the mousse elements, anything that could go wrong did go wrong. One of the mousse split. The other mousse was so tough that they said it was more like a ganache. And he made this de croix that was just overbaked. So everything about it was bad. They could barely even get their forks into it.
It was inedible almost.
Yeah. Which I
and
think...
even the jelly was too rubbery.
Yes, that's true. The jelly was also rubbery. I liked how Mark's jelly design looked better than actually how even Peter's looked. Peter's was very, very underwhelming to me.
Yeah, Peter had some problems. It was too pastel to be Christmassy. His mousse wasn't set. His sponge was overbaked. You know, Peter is stressed when his sponge is overbaked because that boy has never overbaked anything.
For sure. It seems like, though, he barely scraped by on his flavors. They didn't really have anything bad to say about how everything tasted.
Yeah, I think it came down, they could eat Peter's and Mark's. They were like, I cannot eat this concrete.
No bueno. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Peter clawed his way out from the bottom, and sadly for Mark, they sent him home because he was kind of middling on the signature. He did get second in technical, but as we just talked about, he really failed the showstopper. And Ermine, once again, 1-star baker. She got it for the second time in a row.
Well deserved.
Very well deserved.
With Mark's sort of story arc, I kind of wanted him gone in the beginning. I was like, but like, as Paul said, he really did improve, and he like deserved to be there.
He did deserve to be there. I liked Mark. I feel like my impression of Mark is that he seems like a very lovely person. He seems like someone you would absolutely want to know in real life. But as far as TV personalities go, he just didn't have a big character, I guess I would say, for TV, which isn't really a knock against him. It's just, as a viewer, you know, certain people stand out because they have bigger personalities.
You're like, oh, Mark's still here. Yeah, I like him.
Yeah, it's like he's perfectly nice. I want him to do well, but also I'm not so sad to see him go.
Yeah, Dave, I think at this point I'm sick of him just like, I don't know, everything he does is either bad or simple and adequate.
For sure. And also, upon rewatching this episode, they talked about Mark's journey, as they called it, that he kept improving week to week. He was doing so much better than he did in the start of the challenge. And yeah, I definitely agreed with that. But then it's funny because they kind of just transplant that narrative onto Dave going forward. They're like, oh yeah, Dave, he just keeps getting better week to week. He's done the best so far. Like, it's really funny. Like, if we see in like maybe the next episode, I don't know, but they talk about like, oh, Dave he's just getting so much better. And I'm like, wait, that was Mark's story until you sent him home. But it just goes to show
Dave
they don't
sucks.
Yeah, it just goes to show Dave didn't really have a strong story either, or a strong narrative or personality.
Right, yeah. Yeah, they lost all their big personality people early on.
They really did.
I think that does happen with Bake Off. That has happened before in seasons, where it gets down to the final 2 episodes and I'm like, my favorite people are gone. There's left with the boring people. Do I continue watch? I guess I continue watching. I feel like there's definitely been like a season where I don't even watch the last episode because I'm like, I've got no horse in this game, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I still do really like Peter. I'm really glad that Peter is in the competition.
Yeah.
Ermine as well at this point, but also I'm not really excited about either of them in the way that I was about other contestants in previous seasons, like Kim Joy, for example.
Yeah, I agree with that. Those 2 that you listed, I agree that I'm like, yeah, I like these people. I'd be very happy if they succeed, but they weren't like the people I was rooting for.
Exactly. Yeah, but more on that next episode.
Oh my god.
I know, which will be the final 2 episodes of this season of the Great British Bake Off. So that's exciting. Before we get to that and before we wrap up this episode, we're going to head on over to the back burner.
Woo!
Spooky, apparently.
Why? I don't know.
So in honor of Dessert Week's Mini Cheesecake Challenge, we thought we would bring up a debate that has gotten a little bit heated online. And this debate is all about cheesecake. What is it? Is it a cake? Is it a pie? Is it its own thing? So we first kind of talked about this amongst ourselves back in September of 2020 when Alton Brown tweeted, "Let me put this to rest. Cheesecake is pie. Cheesecake is in fact a custard pie. Don't bother replying in the negative. Just adjust your worldview and move on with life." So we ran our own Twitter poll, and apparently you guys disagreed because 57.7% of you said that cheesecake is cake, and 42.3% of you said it was pie. Ooh. And we got almost 500 votes on that, so a lot of you weighed in.
That's a tight poll, though, man.
It's pretty tight, and I have to say everyone who voted cake is wrong. I'm sorry to say. I don't know. I'll go into my thoughts on this, but what do you think, Justine? What is cheesecake?
You know, I think that Alton, at that point, I was like, oh my god, that makes so much sense. It's a poured custard.
In a crust.
In a crust.
Well, some of the people who said cake, which included listeners like Katie, Gemma, Lez Represent podcasts, Ari Maxwell, KMO and someone called a dork, they said that it was a cake because it's right in the name. To which I say, a hot dog is not a dog just because it's got dog in the name.
Damn,
and also,
Meg.
cheesecake is no more cheese than it is cake.
Yeah. Oh my God. You should respond to the people being like, well, where's the cheese?
Exactly.
Where's the cheese?
I also feel like if we have to choose between cake or pie, then I have to go with pie. But if we expand, then I'd say it's kind of its own thing. It's not quite a pie. I'm just trying to imagine, let's say you had your own dessert shop and you had a menu and you had cakes, pies. These are the categories on your menu. Would you put cheesecake under either of those columns? I feel like you would devote your own space to cheesecake.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen that. They're like cake, pies, cheesecakes. Or at least cheesecakes being separate from cakes also.
Yes.
I feel like you brought this up. What if it's a tart?
I didn't bring that up, but one of our listeners did who responded to the Twitter poll. I can't remember who it was offhand. I apologize.
Well, now that Paul says a tart has to have sides, then that's not right.
I also have to say, this is just personal bias, but cake is my favorite type of dessert. On the hierarchy of desserts, cake is number one for me. If I were to tell someone, oh, I love cake, and they gave me cheesecake, I mean, I'd say, thank you, that's very kind of you. But I would also be extremely disappointed because it's not the same thing. It's just not.
So we're getting into cake is sponge territory.
I feel that way. I feel like if we look at the recipe themselves, I have to say that gluten is maybe the main differentiator here, because gluten gives cake this moist, chewy, spongy texture. And the filling of cheesecake, I don't think really ever has flour. You might find some flour in the crust depending on the recipe, but comparatively, cheesecake doesn't really have flour, doesn't have the same texture. With cheesecake, you get this denser, thicker, custardy texture.
Like a custard pie.
Yeah, like Alton Brown would say.
Yeah. Well, come at us.
Yes, and I have to say, the folks who agreed with Alton and ourselves who voted pie in our poll included Margaret, Sohla's Spoon, Reformed Bandits, Nessie, Emoji of a Lemon, Chris, Nicole, Allie, and TJ. So congratulations to all those people for being correct.
Good, fine people.
But yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll run the poll again. Maybe. But let us know what you think. Come find us on Twitter. And shout out to everyone who has found us on Twitter and Instagram and everywhere online to give us their feedback and to just say hello. So thank you to everyone who weighed in on the dishwasher loading debate on our Twitter poll. Y'all are living dangerously with all utensils facing up.
Wow. Get stabbed. No.
Yep. Get stabbed, says Justine.
I didn't mean it that way.
Hashtag get stabbed.
Oh my God, stop.
Thank you to Deconstructing Damsels for sharing in our love of cheese on National Cheese Lovers Day. And thank you also for sharing some of your tasty cheese sauce ideas. Ooh. They sounded delightful. We also asked on Twitter, instead of a Diet Coke button, what food or beverage would you have a button for on your desk in the White House? Marie, Polina, Drew, Jeff, the Drunk Dish podcast, and Varmints podcast all chimed in with their ideas, from buttered toast to Pinot Noir at exactly 55 degrees. Y'all know your minds, and I appreciate that. I also want to give a shout out to Courtney, who is always saying hello and jumping in with her ideas. Always love to hear from you. And finally, thanks to those of you on Instagram who shared what you'd like to make from this season of Jabibo, including Cookbooking Now, Mrs. Casper, and Cookbook Merit Badge. And we agree with you when you say that those brownies need redemption, because the bakers really messed that up.
That's giving me some ideas.
It's brownie time. And we'd really love it if you took the time to leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts. We will share it right here on the episode if you do. We'd love to hear from you, and it helps new listeners find us. So go ahead and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you're enjoying the podcast. And be sure to tune in next episode for episode 9, Patisserie Week, and episode 10, the finale. Yep, we've reached the last 2 episodes of the Great British Bake Off.
Who's gonna win?
We already know, but stay tuned.
Thanks for listening to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
We'd love to hear from you, so find us on Twitter and Instagram at pod_appétit.
And on Facebook at Pod Appétit Podcast.
You can also email us at podappetitpodcast@gmail.com and find all of our episodes on our website, podappetitpodcast.com.
We all love the love story. We pretty much all have a crush on the hero. But what makes the story just so good? What about the woman? Deconstructing Damsels is a podcast all about romance books and why the heroine rocks. The podcast is available on most podcatchers. It's hosted by me, Jessica Hannon, with the occasional guest, and every episode features a different book and heroine. I'll see you guys